Okay, so you hopefully have now found some of your favourite authors. So you've got some books written by the same people. The next thing that we can spot on the cover are the illustrators. And they're the people who draw the pictures in the book. And the pictures in the book, instead of calling them pictures, we can call them illustrations. So an illustrator draws the illustrations, or paints them, in the books that we read. So I've chosen two of my piles of favourite authors because they're also illustrated by the same person in the sets of books. So a lot of Roald Dahl's books are very famous because it says here that with pictures by Quentin Blake. Now Quentin Blake is the illustrator. Here it says illustrated. And if you have a look at the drawings and the illustrations Quentin Blake does, have a look at the eyes, the way he does the characters. This is the crocodile. Have a look at the way he draws the people. Have a look at another one of his books. So this is the Roald Dahl book where he illustrates the twits. You can kind of see that they have their own style of drawing. The monkey there. In fact, that monkey is the same monkey as in here, see? Got Mugglewump. So the illustrators have their own styles. The way they draw people, the way they draw animals, and even the way they colour them in. Now, I'm going to show you an illustrator who's also the author of these books. And these books I think are really lovely. And when you're in year 1 as a Robin, you'll do some work, or maybe in year 2, you'll do some work on the book called Stuck. So I'm not going to show you this one because I don't want to spoil it. And it's something you should keep and not read until you become a Robin, because you'll do some really lovely work on this book. But the author of these stories and the illustrator, so it writes the story and illustrates the pictures, is Oliver Jeffers. And if you have a look at the illustrations he's got in here, the way that he does his animals and the way that he does his people are different to how Quentin Blake illustrates theirs. And in fact, Oliver Jeffers doesn't really ever draw feet on the character, and he often doesn't have like clear legs. Can you see they look like sticks? And then in this book, can you see how the characters look similar? So there's the boy there and the boy there, because each illustrator has their own style. And in fact, look, can you see the same kind of way he draws the legs? Now, before we have a look at this story, Lost and Found, there's a link first of all to a video about Oliver Jeffers. Can you watch that first, and you can find out a little bit more about him and how he illustrates the books. Once you've watched that, come back and we'll read this, and then you can have a go at being an illustrator. And now you have found out a bit more about the author and illustrator, let's have a read of Lost and Found. And as you listen to the story that Oliver Jeffers has written, you can enjoy the illustrations he's drawn for you to enjoy the book and to see what he thinks the characters look like in his story. So this book is Lost and Found. Once there was a boy, and one day he found a penguin at his door. The boy didn't know where he had come from, but it began to follow him everywhere. The penguin looked sad, and the boy thought it must be lost. So the boy decided to help the penguin find its way home. It says here, look, Lost and Found office. He checked in the Lost and Found office, but no one was missing a penguin. Can you see how he's illustrated the trees here, the shapes that he's used, his own style? He asked some birds if they knew where the penguin came from, but they ignored him. Some birds are like that. The boy asked his duck, but the duck floated away. He didn't know. That night, the boy couldn't sleep for disappointment. He wanted to help the penguin, but he didn't know how. The next morning, he discovered that penguins come from the South Pole. But how could he get there? He ran down to the harbour and asked a big ship to take them to the South Pole. But his voice was much too small to be heard over the ship's horn. Goodness me, that ship must be really humongous. Look at the size of the lighthouse compared to that ship. So together, he and the penguin would row to the South Pole. The boy took his rowboat out of the cupboard and they tested it for size and strength. They packed everything they would need. And together, they pushed the rowboat out to sea. They rowed south for many days. At night, with the boy telling stories all the way, the penguin listened to everything that the boy said. See the way Oliver Jeffers has drawn the sea? How he's done the illustrations here. I bet if you looked in other books, you'd see how illustrators do the sea in a different way. Now, actually, just looking at this illustration, straight away, we know what's about to happen, don't we? We can imagine what it's like being there. They floated through good weather and bad, when the waves were as big as mountains. Until they came to the South Pole. The boy was delighted, but the penguin said nothing. Suddenly, it looked sad again as the boy helped it out of the boat. There's a sign there that says, "Welcome to the South Pole." I wonder why the penguin looked sad again. Any ideas? The boy said goodbye and floated away, but as he looked back, the penguin looked sadder than ever. Aww. It felt strange to be on his own, and the more he thought, the more he realised he was making a big mistake. The penguin wasn't lost. He was just lonely. Quickly, he turned the boat around and headed back to the South Pole as fast as he could. There he goes that way, but, oh look, this illustration is giving us a bit more of the story. As the boy goes that way, what's he going to miss? Yeah, he won't see the penguin. At last, he reached the pole again, but where was the penguin? The boy searched and searched, but he was nowhere to be found. Sadly, the boy set off for home. There was no point telling stories because there was no one to listen, except the wind and the waves. But then, the boy saw something in the water ahead of him. Can you spot it? Closer and closer he got, until he could see the penguin. Oh, look, there's no words here, but this illustration, I bet you can guess how they're feeling. And so, the boy and his friend went home together, talking of wonderful things all the way. I hope you enjoyed that book. I really like that story. And the illustrations really helped to make the story special, I think. Now, do you reckon you could be an illustrator? Now, in the link below, there's also a link to some pictures where Oliver Jeffers, the author and the illustrator, shows you how to draw a penguin. So you can draw your own penguin, like the one in the book Lost and Found. So you can have a go at following the pictures and see, can you be an illustrator like Oliver Jeffers?